You wake before the sun does. The dim light that trickles through the cracked window panes of the Topkapi Palace servant quarters is barely enough to find your way, but your feet know the route. Your name is Hamdi. You are 17, a janitor, and your job is to sweep the endless stone corridors of the imperial palace before the sultans, viziers, eunuchs, and concubines awaken. You carry a broom of bundled twigs and a bucket that leaks if you tilt it too far to the left. Every morning is nearly identical, the click of your sandals on the damp floors, the distant sounds of seagulls over the Bosphorus, and the smell of stale rose water and damp marble. But this morning, you hum. Just a bit. Just a low tune, barely noticeable, but it slips out before you realize it. It's a silly melody, something your aunt used to sing while cooking lentils in your village. Something nobody important would ever care about. But it makes your feet feel lighter. So, while sweeping the second hall of the Imperial Council wing, you shuffle your feet slightly. A twist here. A tap there. Nothing intentional. Just an accident of rhythm. You spin the broom by its shaft, just once, and it catches the light like a sword. You freeze. What are you doing? This is a palace. This is the Ottoman Empire. This is 1683. People have been beheaded for less. But no one saw. You resume sweeping, more cautiously now. You try to banish the rhythm from your body, but it persists. It creeps into your hands, into your ankles, into your shoulders. You begin to understand what they mean when the dervishes talk about surrender. Not surrender to a sultan or a sheikh, but to something inside you. By the time the bells sound for morning prayer, you've already finished 2 entire halls. A record, by your own standard. You make your way to the cistern to rinse your bucket, and as you bend to draw water, an older servant, Nazim, watches you. "You're lighter today," he says without smiling. He rarely smiles. His beard is grey like ash. You nod. Less dust in the halls. He squints. Or more music in your head. You stiffen. He must have seen something. But before you can answer, he waves you off. "Keep your joy quiet," he says. "Walls in this palace have more ears than the harem." You nod again and scurry off. Your heart thumps. You don't want to be noticed. Being noticed is dangerous. Later that afternoon, the chief steward assigns you to clean the Hall of Petitions, a rare task for someone of your rank. You know this hall. It's vast, with high domed ceilings and intricate Iznik tiles. It echoes like a canyon, and you're supposed to be in and out in under 20 minutes. But when you enter and the doors shut behind you, the silence is too tempting. You glance around. No one. So you begin to sweep. Not carefully, not quietly, but with a spin. You twist your foot. You pivot. You sway. Your broom becomes a partner, not a tool. Your slippers glide across the marble. It's like a conversation between your souls and the stone. You let the rhythm carry you, the same one from the village, the same one you forgot you remembered. For a full minute, you lose yourself. You are no longer Hamdi the janitor. You are Hamdi the something else. A kind of shadow dancer. A ghost with a broom. Then you hear it, a soft clap. Just once. Your spine goes rigid. You whip around. A figure stands in the doorway, silhouetted by the light from the outer court. Robed. Watching. Again, says a voice. A woman's voice. Soft, but commanding. You're frozen. Your hands tremble. I was only, you stammer. Again, she repeats. You realize she's not wearing the garb of a servant, nor a concubine. Her robes are clean, her posture assured. A courtier? A noble woman? No, she moves too freely. Then you notice the veil. White. Modest. A nun? A rahib? Here? You don't move. I said, she says, stepping forward now, do it again. And against your own fear, your own judgment, your body obeys before your mind catches up. You dance. And that is how it begins. You aren't sure how long you danced. It might have been 10 seconds or 10 minutes. Time had no meaning in that echoing hall, under her gaze. When you stopped, chest heaving, hands still clenched around the broomstick, she was closer than before. Her face remained veiled, but her eyes were sharp, the kind that slice without needing a blade. That wasn't nothing, she said, though you seemed to think it was. You stood there like a thief caught in the Sultan's treasury. Words failed you. Where did you learn it? She asked. I didn't, you replied, too quickly. She tilted her head. Then why do your feet remember? You stared down at them. Barely moving. Guilty things. I don't know, you said. It just happened. She studied you a moment longer, then turned and walked away, robes trailing behind like a wake in still water. Clean slower next time, she called over her shoulder. And listen to the marble. It speaks better than most men. Then she was gone. The rest of the day passed in a blur. You finished your chores. You didn't speak. You barely ate. At night, you returned to your shared sleeping quarters, lying on your back on the straw mat, staring at the cracked plaster of the ceiling. The others snored softly around you, men who had no idea they slept beside a boy who had just met something impossible. Or someone impossible. You tried to convince yourself it had been a dream. A trick of the light. A hallucination brought on by lack of breakfast. But your arms still ached in that pleasant way they do when you've worked with joy. Your feet twitched of their own accord. You could still hear her voice, soft but cutting, like silk across the neck. The broom leaned against the wall, innocent, as if it hadn't helped you betray centuries of silence. Sleep never really came. At dawn, before the others stirred, you crept into the corridor and tried again. This time, no music hummed in your throat. No rhythm guided you. You just stood there, feeling ridiculous, and swayed once, then stopped. Nothing. You tried a turn. A sweep of the arm. A pivot. All mechanical. Hollow. You realized something terrible. It only worked when no one was watching. Or maybe, only when she was. You hurried through your duties, head down. Every marble tile reminded you of her words. Listen to the marble. What did that even mean? On your lunch break, you snuck away to the unused servants' corridor behind the old kitchens. Dusty. Forgotten. Perfect. And there, alone, you tried again. This time, you didn't think. You just moved. You let the broom drag you forward. The walls felt close, the floor rough, but your feet remembered. Slowly, like an old friend returning home, the rhythm found you again. You lost yourself once more, not fully, but enough. You weren't alone. She stepped from the shadows again. This time without veil. You gasped. She was young. No older than 20, maybe younger. Her skin pale, European. Her eyes the color of burned tea. Her hair braided and tucked beneath a cloth wrap. I thought I might find you here, she said. You nearly dropped the broom. Are you following me? I'm listening, she corrected. Same thing, sometimes. You blinked. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, she said. But here we are. She walked closer, circling you, studying your posture, your grip, your balance. Where are your shoes? You looked down. You'd left them behind without realizing it. Your toes gripped the cool stone instinctively. You move better without them, she murmured. Keep it that way. She extended a hand. Again, she said. You hesitated. Why? You asked. Because it's beautiful, she said. And beauty is rare in this place. You danced again. Not for yourself this time, but for her. And you didn't stop until she smiled. Days passed, and the meetings became ritual. Always in hidden places, abandoned corridors, storage rooms, even once inside a disused bathhouse with vines growing through the cracks in the wall. Always in secret. Always with her watching, correcting, encouraging. Her name, you learned, was Sister Lucienne, though she told you only because you refused to dance again without it. You're not a nun, you said the first time she gave it. I was, she replied. In Venice. Before I was sold. You didn't know what to say. You knew slaves came from everywhere, Greeks, Italians, Africans, but hearing it from her mouth made it real. Personal. How did you end up here, you asked. She looked past you, through the crumbling stone, into a memory. Wrong place, wrong port, wrong priest, she said. But wrong doesn't always mean bad. Then she turned back to you. Show me the turn again. So you did. She began teaching, though she never said that's what it was. Your weight is too far forward, she'd say. Your elbows hang like meat. You're thinking. Stop thinking. Bit by bit, she chiseled away the stiffness. She never danced herself, not fully, but sometimes she'd show you pieces. A flick of the wrist. A bend of the knee. Foreign gestures. Elegant. Sharp. She said in Venice they had dances for everything, courtship, mourning, religion. Every gesture had meaning. And in the palace, you asked. Only survival, she said. You practiced in silence, sometimes until your muscles shook. Then she'd nod, hand you a cloth to wipe your sweat, and vanish again like smoke through a crack. You still swept floors. Still hauled water. Still scrubbed latrines. But now your feet moved with purpose. Your back held straighter. You began to feel something rising in you, something long buried under layers of obedience. A voice without sound. A fire without heat. One morning, while sweeping the imperial gardens, you caught yourself moving to the rhythm of the wind. You twirled the broom absent-mindedly, just once, and a guard clearing his throat behind you nearly made you drop it. He stared. Then frowned. Then walked on. You didn't breathe until he was gone. That night, you told Lucienne. You must be more careful, she said, frowning for the first time. I didn't mean to, you replied. It happens now. She nodded, slowly. That's when it's real. But it's also when it's dangerous. You looked at her. Why are you helping me? She was quiet for a long time. Because when I watch you move, she said, I forget I'm a prisoner. You swallowed hard. Is that what this is? Just a game between two people stuck behind walls? No, she said. It's the beginning of something else. Then she reached into her robe and pulled out a small bundle, a string of brass bells tied to a strip of leather. For your ankles, she said. You stared at the bells. They were old. Worn smooth by use. Something from her past life, perhaps. They'll make noise, you said. People will hear. Good, she said. You need to hear too. You hesitated before tying them on. The weight felt odd, but not wrong. When you moved, they jingled, faintly, uncertainly, like a whisper learning how to speak. Try, she said. So you danced. Slowly at first, then with more force. The bells chimed in time with your steps. They didn't betray you, they joined you. For the first time, your movements had a sound of their own. A voice. You felt tears in your eyes and didn't know why. Lucienne clapped, soft and delighted. You see, she said. Now the marble isn't the only one talking. You didn't sleep that night. The bells stayed on your ankles as you lay in your cot, hidden beneath your trousers. You feared they'd ring when you turned in your sleep. They didn't. But in your dream, they sang. The bells became your secret heartbeat. You wore them every night now, hidden beneath linen wraps tied around your legs. You walked more carefully through the palace halls, learning how to step in silence or let a single chime slip into the air like a cough. You danced only when no one else was near, but your mind danced always. Lucienne changed, too. She grew more direct, more urgent. She began using words like posture, phrasing, performance. She spoke of intention, how every gesture had to mean something. That your body must become a language. "But what am I saying?" you asked once. She'd only smiled. "That you're alive." One night, she arrived holding something in a folded cloth, a short rod of polished wood with small glass beads at each end. "A cane?" you asked. "A prop," she said. "You're going to learn how to dance with it." You frowned. "What kind of dancing uses sticks?" She raised an eyebrow. "You think your broom wasn't a stick?" You laughed for the first time in weeks. The cane was a challenge. You dropped it. Tripped over it. Hit yourself in the shin. Lucienne didn't laugh. She stood silently as you fumbled, watching, absorbing. "Don't treat it like a weapon," she said. "Treat it like an extension of your spine." "Spine doesn't hit the floor," you muttered, rubbing your leg. "Yours might." Eventually, your movement smoothed. You used it to balance, to direct, to punctuate. When you spun it overhead and caught it cleanly behind your back, Lucienne clapped once and grinned. "You've crossed the line," she said. "What line?" "The one between accident and choice." The cane changed everything. It was no longer just about sweeping or spinning, you were telling a story, even if you didn't yet know what it was. A peasant's broom had become a dancer's baton. A janitor's job had become something else. Something dangerous. It was a Tuesday, you think, when you were nearly caught. You'd chosen the long corridor behind the kitchens, the one with cracked floor tiles and soot-blackened beams. Lucienne hadn't arrived yet. You thought you had time. So you danced. The bells sang. The cane sliced the air. You spun, lifted, dropped low, kicked out, a phrase Lucienne had called the hook, and you were rising again when a throat cleared behind you. You froze. A steward stood at the end of the hallway. Not a high-ranking one, but one with enough power to report you. He stared at you, lips slightly parted. "What are you doing?" he asked. You couldn't answer. He stepped forward. Then, to your shock, he smiled. "You doing that for the palace festival?" You blinked. "What?" "The new moon celebration," he said. "You're part of the servants' performance, right?" You nodded without thinking. He chuckled. "Well done. You've got flair, boy. You'd better not tell the cooks though, they'll want you dancing in aprons next." And he walked away. You were still trembling when Lucienne arrived moments later. "You're pale," she said. "What happened?" You told her. Every word. When you finished, she didn't speak right away. She just stared at you with a strange look in her eyes. "Then it begins," she said finally. "What does?" She took a deep breath. "You're no longer invisible." That night, she brought you a roll of cloth, darker, finer. "Wrap this around your legs instead," she said. "And if anyone asks again, yes, you're rehearsing for the new moon performance. It's in 2 weeks." "But I'm not in it," you said. She smiled. "You are now." You didn't know whether to feel excited or terrified. You'd spent your life trying not to be seen. Now you were being invited into the light, not by a sultan or a vizier, but by the whisper network of the palace's lower world. Kitchen boys. Bath attendants. Seamstresses. Gardeners. And they wanted to see you move. You weren't ready. But you would be. 2 weeks. 14 days. That was all the time you had. Lucienne intensified your sessions. There were no more pauses, no more soft smiles, no more poetic metaphors about marble and memory. Now there were drills. Precision. Pain. You danced until your lungs burned and your legs refused to obey. You want to be a ghost, she snapped once. Then learn to haunt properly. The cane became your spine. The bells became your breath. You moved faster now, but not carelessly. There was a rhythm inside you, yes, but there was also intention. Every step meant something. Every gesture had a shape. She taught you to enter a room like a shadow and leave like a ripple. But she never let you perform it straight through. Not yet, she'd say. The last piece only fits when you're being watched. That terrified you. You don't need perfection, she said one night. You need permission. From who, you asked. She didn't answer. Whispers spread. A servant girl in the laundry smiled at you differently. An old eunuch near the gates gave you a knowing nod. In the kitchens, someone dropped a plate and muttered, if Hamdi danced, maybe the dishes wouldn't run away. You felt exposed, but not mocked. They weren't laughing at you. They were waiting. On the 12th night, Lucien handed you a small pouch of crushed charcoal and rose oil. Paint your hands, she said. Why? So they leave traces. You dipped your fingers into the mixture and ran them along your palms, then your forearms. It stained like ink, bled into the creases of your skin. When you danced that night, your hand sliced the air like calligraphy. Afterward, you looked at them and whispered, "What am I becoming?" Lucien answered from the shadows, something remembered. The last rehearsal, she said nothing. Only watched. When you finished, trembling and dripping with sweat, she stepped forward and placed her hand on your shoulder. You're ready. The performance was to take place during the new moon feast, not in the grand court, but in the servants' courtyard behind the bathhouses, where the real life of the palace simmered. It was unofficial. Unrecorded. The sultans would never know of it, but the people who mattered would. Cooks, scribes, gardeners, water carriers, wet nurses, concubines between duties, they all gathered that night. They brought wine, figs, spiced meat. Someone lit lanterns in colors the court would have called vulgar. There was laughter. Storytelling. A boy played a reed flute until he fell asleep in a basket. And when the moonless hour came, Lucien stepped forward and raised her hand. Silence fell. She gestured toward the far end of the courtyard, and you stepped into the circle. For a moment, you couldn't breathe. Every face turned to you. Every sound vanished. All you had was the cane, the bells, and your own heart, galloping like a runaway horse. Then you moved. You danced. Not like a servant. Not like a boy sweeping halls or dodging stewards. You danced like a story told through flesh and breath. The cane spun and struck the earth like punctuation. Your bells sang. Your stained hands carved shapes into the firelit air. Gasps. Then cheers. Then silence again, reverent, startled, as if they had all seen something holy. When you stopped, chest heaving, one of the washerwomen whispered, "He made the dust rise like birds." Lucien appeared at your side, smiling, not just pleased, but proud. "Now they'll talk," she said. "Who?" "Everyone." You looked around. Faces glowed. Smiles bloomed. Something had changed. Not just in them. In you. Because in that moment, for the first time, you had been seen and loved for it. And you knew something even more dangerous than dancing in the dark. You would want to do it again. The next morning, everything felt different. Not the marble floors. Not the drafty halls or the smoky kitchens. But you. Something inside had shifted, subtly, permanently. Like a door that had always been closed was now ajar, letting in wind, light, and sound. You swept the council wing with a new posture. Not arrogant, not careless, but alive. You moved with rhythm even when you didn't mean to. The broom glided. Your wrist turned just so. A slight pivot here. A breath held there. The whispers returned. Louder now. Less secret. That's him. The boy from the courtyard. Did you see how he bent the wind? You told yourself not to smile. You failed. Lucienne was nowhere that day. You searched the laundry lines, the hall behind the bathhouse, even the dusty old cistern, but she had vanished like she often did. Ghost quiet. Shadow sure. You missed her. That made you uneasy. So that night, you danced alone. No audience. No coach. Just you and the marble. And the echo that followed every step. 3 days passed before she returned. You found her on a rooftop, seated cross-legged, arms folded in her lap. She looked tired. Thinner. Her veil was back. I thought you left, you said. I did, she answered. Why? Because I needed to hear what they said when I wasn't beside you. You sat beside her. Below, the palace pulsed, torches flickering, guards pacing, the distant cries of gulls settling on the Bosphorus. And you asked. She didn't speak at first. Then, quietly, they're hungry. For what? For something real. You looked at her. They think I'm a joke. They think you're proof, she said. That something forgotten can rise. That a janitor can become a symbol. That beauty can be born from a bucket. You sat with that. It didn't feel true, but maybe that was the point. The truth doesn't wait for you to believe in it. It wasn't just servants now. Pages, the young boys who ran scrolls between wings, began lingering near you when you swept. A guard once saluted you, then winked. One morning, even a concubine passed you in the hallway, her silk skirts whispering as she murmured, I heard your steps from the harem window. This was not what you had wanted. Or maybe it was, and you just never admitted it. Lucienne sensed it, too. You're becoming visible, she said. Which means your enemies are also beginning to see you. You frowned. Enemies. She nodded slowly. The palace is not a place where light shines without attracting flies. Sure enough, that night, when you entered the old storeroom where you used to practice, someone had ransacked it. The bench overturned. The bells missing. Even the cane, broken. Your breath caught. Lucienne appeared in the doorway moments later. Her face was still, but her hands were fists. It begins, she whispered. The next day, you were reassigned. No more gardens. No more council halls. Now you were sweeping the animal pens behind the imperial kitchens, ankle deep in mud, stench, and fly clouds. You knew what it meant. Someone had noticed. Someone higher. Lucienne confirmed it that evening. The festival made you powerful, she said. And that made you dangerous. To who? She gave a sad smile. To anyone who likes their servant silent. You looked down at your empty ankles. You still felt the ghost of the bells. What do I do? You keep dancing, she said. Even if it's just in your mind. Even if it's through manure. You stared at her. That's madness. No, she said, stepping closer. That's revolution. You laugh bitterly. With a cane and a broom. She touched your cheek. With a story. And you've already told the first line. You danced in filth. At first, it was a joke. A punishment. Shoveling waste, chasing goats, mopping muddy stone. No one watched you here, not even the flies, it seemed. The others averted their eyes. No one wanted to talk to the boy who had risen too far, too fast. But you moved anyway. You practiced footwork in the slop, balance among the straw, even wrist turns as you ladled water from barrels. Your body remembered. The cane was gone, but a stick was a stick. You found one behind the coop, crooked, worm-worn, perfect. At night, Lucienne met you in a storage shed that stank of onions and smoke. You danced by lantern light. She timed your steps with claps. Harder now. Sharper. Anyone can dance on marble, she said. But if you can move them in the mud, they'll never forget you. You tried. Every night. And slowly, impossibly, it began to happen again. First, a butcher's boy stopped to watch. Then a kitchen girl leaned in through the cracked door. They whispered. And you danced. It spread like spilled oil. One night, a group of bath attendants brought drums, small, hand-held, smuggled beneath aprons. Another time, someone brought sweets and left them at your feet like offerings. You didn't touch them. You didn't have to. Lucienne began calling it the undercourt. She said it wasn't just a dance anymore. It was a current. A story carried by feet, she whispered. And feet move faster than tongues. The Sultan would never see it. The viziers would pretend not to know. But the real palace, the one beneath the gold leaf and calligraphy, that palace was stirring. You caught yourself wondering, what if the broom had never slipped that day? What if you'd just swept like every other morning? You wouldn't be here, ankle deep in waste, a crowd of nobodies watching you like you were something sacred. But you were here. And they were here. And every step you took was no longer yours alone. One night, a stranger came. He wore servant robes but didn't move like one. Too quiet. Too clean. His face was smooth, unreadable. When he entered the shed, the others fell silent. Lucienne saw it first. Her body tensed. Keep dancing, she said under her breath. You did. The stranger watched. Arms crossed. He said nothing. Not during. Not after. When you finished, breathless and soaked in sweat, he turned to Lucienne and murmured, "He has the room. He does not yet have the language." Then he left. Lucienne didn't speak for a long time after that. She just stared at the empty doorway like it had stolen something from her. "Who was that?" you finally asked. She shook her head. The beginning of something bigger. Or the end. What does that mean? It means, she whispered, we're no longer invisible. You didn't sleep that night. You listened to the palace breathe. And wondered if it was holding its breath for you. The next day, you were called to the upper kitchens, a strange promotion. Cleaner air, polished copper pots, serious faces. You were handed a tray and told to deliver it to the library of the inner court. You'd never even seen the inside of it. When you entered, you nearly gasped. High domes. Walls lined with books bound in leather and silk. Domed windows letting in shafts of morning light like God's fingers. And at the far table, a man sat, robed in emerald green. His face was thin. Tired. Clever. He looked up. You are the dancer. Not a question. A fact. You froze. Come closer, he said. You did. He studied you the way you might study an insect crawling across a calligraphy scroll, curious, but not yet cruel. Then he said, this palace eats those who think they are more than their station. But sometimes, he tilted his head. Sometimes it pauses. He handed you a scroll. Learn this. You'll need it. You left, heart thundering, the scroll pressed against your chest like a second heart. You didn't open the scroll for hours. Not in the library. Not in the kitchens. Not even in the straw-scented hallway where you usually changed your sandals. You waited until nightfall, until the others were asleep, and the only sound in the servant quarters was the distant creak of timber and the whisper of rats in the walls. Then you unrolled it beneath the flickering flame of a stolen lamp. It wasn't a threat. It was a notation, symbols, lines, flourishes you didn't understand, but somehow recognized. Not writing, exactly. Not music either. But something in between. You brought it to Lucienne. She studied it, and her eyes went wide. It's dance, she said. Written dance. Written, you asked. You can write movement. Some do. In Florence. In Paris. And once, long ago, in Constantinople. You stared at the parchment, and it seemed to pulse. I think they want you to learn it, she said. You looked at her. Why? Because someone's building something, she said. And they want you inside it. So you studied. By day, you swept. By night, you danced. And in the dim hours before dawn, you traced the symbols again and again, matching lines to movement, curves to turns, strokes to posture. Lucienne translated what she could. The rest, you felt. Each page was a puzzle. A score for the body. Some parts reminded you of what you already knew, others demanded shapes your limbs had never made. Pain returned. But this time, it was sacred. You used the crooked stick from the coop. Eventually it snapped from overuse, so you carved another. Smoother. Balanced. Yours. You danced alone, but not in silence. The scroll spoke. The marble echoed. Sometimes, others watched through cracks in the wall. Sometimes, they cried. One night, Lucienne whispered, "They're copying you." What? In the laundries. The gardens. Even the infirmary. Little boys spin with brooms now. Girls mimic your steps between sheets. You didn't know whether to laugh or panic. "They're watching, Hamdi," she said. And not just you. It was around then that the accidents began. A spilled tray near your feet. A bucket of wash water dumped on your path. A brush handle left under your sleeping mat. No one said anything, but you saw the glances. Not from your watchers, but from those who feared what you were becoming. "You're threatening the shape," Lucienne said. The shape. The old ways, she said. The one where everything stays exactly where it began. Where no one rises. Where no one dances. But I'm just. You're never just anything anymore. You looked down at your fingers, stained again with charcoal and oil. They didn't feel like a janitor's hands anymore. That night, you danced with a cracked lantern in one hand. It swung and shimmered with each spin, painting flames on the walls. Someone watching gasped. Later, they called it the lantern spiral. Someone else mimicked it in the latrines the next day. Your movements were becoming names. And names, Lucienne said, become weapons. Then came the parchment. Folded, unsigned, tucked inside your laundry shift. Just one sentence. "If you dance again, you will not dance again." You showed Lucienne. She held it over a candle, let it burn to ash. "Empty threats," she said. "A lion doesn't warn before it strikes." That didn't help. For days, you hesitated. You moved more cautiously. The rhythm dulled. Your steps faltered. The scroll sat untouched under your sleeping mat. And the palace noticed. The drums stopped coming. The eyes turned away. Lucienne pulled you aside. "You're letting them win." "They're watching," you said. "Waiting for me to slip." Then slip, she snapped. Fall. Fail. Crash. But don't stop. Because stopping is the only thing they truly want. You looked at her. "What if I'm not enough?" She smiled, tired but unyielding. "Then you become more." So you danced. Not boldly. Not triumphantly. But deliberately, like a man building a bridge between two cliffs with nothing but thread and breath. You danced in the darkest corners of the palace. In the stables while horses snorted behind you. In the laundry halls when steam rose from cauldrons and softened the stone. Even in the corridors of the infirmary, where broken servants slept behind curtains and listened to your feet like a lullaby. You didn't speak. You didn't need to. The scroll returned to your hands. The marks made more sense now, as if your body had caught up to their rhythm. You no longer translated them, you obeyed them. Lucienne said little during those weeks. She watched more than she taught. Occasionally, she placed a coin under your heel or a bowl on your head to test balance. You hated it. She smiled. You've stopped dancing for me, she said one night. That's good. You looked up, confused. You're dancing through me now, she added. Even better. Then came the second invitation. This time, not to a servants' festival or hidden storeroom, but to a small, private room in the West Wing, where 3 robed figures sat behind a silk curtain. Lucienne didn't accompany you. She simply handed you a scarf. Wrap your eyes, she said. And don't remove it. The room smelled of rose oil and parchment. A musician plucked a single string slowly, waiting for your first step. You danced blind. At first, you panicked, no walls, no markers, no way to read the space. But soon, your body adjusted. Your other senses sharpened. The floor spoke. The air warned you before each turn. You let go. The scarf dampened with sweat, but you didn't stop. Not until the string fell silent. Then, silence. You waited. Then, from behind the curtain. Where did you learn this? You said nothing. A beat. Then, good. When you removed the scarf, the room was empty. Only a single feather lay on the floor. Lucienne saw the feather and grew still. Who was there? She asked. I don't know. 3 shapes. No faces. She took the feather from your palm, long, white, flawless. They know now, she said. Know what? That you exist. That you move. That you can carry meaning. To who? To people who matter. You thought for a long moment. I didn't ask to be their messenger. She shrugged. No one ever does. But the message doesn't care. From that night on, things began to shift. Small things, servants who once ignored you now bowed their heads. A steward handed you a clean broom without being asked. One morning, your name, your real name, appeared written on the duty roster, not just boy. And larger things, scrolls arriving with no sender. Dancers you didn't know practicing your movements in courtyards before dawn. A girl from the kitchens calling you Tastad as you passed. You become a rumor wearing shoes. And rumors travel faster than dancers. One afternoon, while sweeping a rarely used marble corridor near the concubine chambers, you saw something that stopped your breath. A young nobleman, no more than 17, spinning in the very motions you'd created. Not mocking. Mimicking. He noticed you. Froze. You stepped forward. Where did you learn that? You asked. He flushed. From a page. Who learned it from a cook? Who learned it from a girl who saw it in the mud pens? Why? He looked you in the eye. Because it's beautiful. You said nothing. He reached into his sash and handed you a folded scrap. This is for you, he said. They're gathering. Soon. Who? He didn't answer, just walked away, footsteps echoing like the final beat of a drum. You unfolded the paper. It read, "The Shadow Court invites you to perform. 3 nights from now. Come unseen. Leave unforgettable." Lucienne read it over your shoulder. Then whispered, "It's beginning. 3 nights." That was all you had to prepare, not for survival, but for something stranger, acceptance. Invitation. You, who had spent your life avoiding notice, now stood on the edge of being welcomed. But welcomed into what? Lucienne said nothing about the Shadow Court. She only said it wasn't a place. It was an idea. A gathering that floated under the Empire, between breath and rumor, between glance and silence. A court made of whispers and memory. You practiced again. Harder this time. Not because you feared failure, but because you feared success. That your name might leave your body. That your movements might grow legs and walk into mouths, and be repeated, reshaped, misunderstood. Lucienne understood. She made you dance in silence. In reverse. With rocks tied to your limbs. with incense burning so thick you could barely breathe. She pulled you into spaces so tight, you had to invent new angles just to turn. "This is what it means to be carried," she said. "By the story. By the watchers. By the weight." You bore it. And waited. The night came. You dressed not as a janitor, not as a performer, but as no one, plain brown wraps, no shoes, no bells, no ornament. Lucien wrapped your arms in charcoal linen, tied your old cane to your back like a pilgrim's staff. "You don't enter as Hamdi," she said. "You enter as the echo of everything they've whispered." You nodded. The meeting place was beneath the old cisterns, ruins of an older empire beneath the palace's own belly. You moved like smoke through the hallways, ducking guards, stepping between the sighs of sleeping servants. You reached the iron grate and slipped through. They were waiting. Maybe 20 of them. Maybe more. Shapes in shadow. Some wore veils. Some hoods. Some stood. Some sat cross-legged on rugs. No names were spoken. No torches were lit, only oil lamps flickering behind cloth. Someone stepped forward and simply said, "Dance." So you did. You danced without music. Without cane. Without space. Without stage. But you moved with them, with their watching, their holding of breath, their silence. The floor was uneven, but your feet remembered. The ceiling was low, but your arms shaped the dark. You turned. You dropped. You struck the stone with your heels and sent dust spiraling. Your hands wrote the air like a forgotten alphabet. They didn't cheer. They didn't applaud. But they didn't need to. When you finished, someone whispered, "It is true." Another echoed, "He is the rumor." One stepped forward and offered you a pouch of coin. You refused. Another offered a velvet sash. You refused. A third, her voice young, but her posture ancient, said simply, "Then take the silence. You've earned it." So you did. You bowed, slow and full. And as you turned to leave, someone placed a small note in your palm. You didn't read the note until you were alone, back in the servants' quarter, beneath your blanket, heart still pounding. It said, "You are no longer a dancer. You are a spark." Beneath it, a symbol, a flame curled into a circle. You showed it to Lucien the next morning. She took one look and sat down, hard. "What is it?" you asked. She looked up at you, her eyes wet. "It's older than the Sultan," she said. "Older than the crescent. It's the mark of the fire tongue." "The what?" She gripped your wrist. "The oldest form of resistance in the palace. Forgotten. Suppressed. They haven't marked anyone in 50 years. You stared at the flame. "But I'm nobody." "No," she said. "You were. Now you're something else." The word sat in the air between you, spark. And you felt it then, as clear as your own breath. You were no longer just dancing. You were starting a fire. From that night forward, everything shifted. Not loudly. Not with explosions. But like earth warming beneath frost. Unseen, slow, unstoppable. You returned to your janitor's duties, of course, sweeping, scrubbing, emptying basins, but even the tools felt different in your hands now. The broom was no longer a symbol of servitude. It was part of the rhythm. Your rhythm. And others began to reflect that rhythm back. A girl in the dye halls tapped her feet in patterns you recognized. A stable boy spun a feed bucket once, deliberately, then looked at you and smiled. A kitchen steward broke his step in the halls, twice, just enough to echo your pivot. None of them said it. But you knew. You were no longer a dancer. You were a code, passed silently from ankle to wrist, shoulder to shoulder, among the forgotten. Lucien said it best. You are a kind of infection now. A beautiful, glorious one. You wanted to deny it. But then, the chalk symbols began to appear. At first, just one, on a stairwell behind the paper library, a small flame, drawn with 3 looping lines. Then another, near the basin by the copper pots, a footprint made of ash, the toes pointed like a dancer's mid-turn. Then dozens. You saw them where no overseer looked, behind closet doors, on laundry carts, carved lightly into broom handles. Always small. Always hidden. Always burning. Someone, or someones, were answering the spark. Not just copying, not just admiring, but spreading. Lucienne called it the silent choreography. It's becoming a network, she said. Like veins through stone. You felt both wonder and dread. This wasn't what I meant to happen. No, she agreed. But meaning is irrelevant now. The story's out. Then, with a glint in her eye, can you keep up with it? You didn't answer. But you knew you had to try. Then, one night, a message came, scrawled in ink on clean linen, slipped beneath your sleeping mat. The court above has noticed. They are watching. Make your next movement count. You showed Lucienne. She didn't panic. She paced. This isn't the shadow court, she said. This is the real one. The gilded. The dangerous. You think it's a warning. No, she said. It's an invitation disguised as a threat. That week, strange things began to happen. You were not reassigned to the stables, even though you were due. Your broom was replaced without request, a lighter, stronger shaft. A guard at the outer baths nodded at you, then stepped aside for no reason. You were given a uniform 2 sizes too large until you checked the collar and saw a single, stitched flame. They were not punishing you anymore. They were testing you. And you were passing. Lucienne took you to a new space that night. Not a storeroom. Not a shed. A hall of mirrors, unused, dusty, broken in places, but once meant for court performances. You didn't ask how she had the key. The mirrors terrified you. They didn't just reflect, they multiplied. Every angle of your body, every flaw, every hesitation was now a chorus. Good, Lucienne said. You need to see what they see. You danced, surrounded by yourself, your posture, your failures, your growth. You stumbled. You recovered. You turned too early. You watched yourself do it again. But by the end, you moved like many people at once. You caught your own reflection smiling, not mockingly, but knowingly. Lucienne whispered from the shadows. You are no longer one body. You are becoming a vocabulary. You left that night shaken. Not by fear, but by the realization that something was taking shape around you. A movement. A mirror. A message. And soon, a decision. The next week arrived with a quiet that wasn't silence, it was suspense. As if the palace itself was waiting, holding its marble breath. Lucienne gave you no new lessons. No scrolls. No cloth. Just one sentence. Watch who follows you when you're not dancing. So you did. And you began to see them. A scullery boy who always happened to sweep the same corridor, 20 steps behind you. A scribe who took notes near the cistern but never turned a page. A girl in the baths who lingered too long behind the steam screen. Some were curious. Others were measuring you. Lucienne nodded when you told her. It's the middle tier, she said. Servants of the viziers. Harem page boys. Kitchen whisperers. The ones who report not with speech, but with silence. What are they looking for, you asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she gave you a wrapped bundle. Inside, your bells. Polished. Retied. Put them on, she said. You hadn't worn the bells in weeks. They felt heavier now. Not physically, but in meaning. You tied them around your ankles with shaking hands, the soft clink like the return of a forgotten name. That night, she led you back to the Hall of Mirrors. But this time, others were there. Not watching. Waiting. 3 young men and 2 girls, all seated against the walls. Robes plain. Eyes alert. Hands folded neatly in their laps. None of them spoke as you entered. They simply nodded. Lucien turned to you. Tonight, you don't perform. You teach. You froze. What? They've seen you. Now they need to learn how to see themselves. You looked at the silent watchers. One cracked his knuckles. Another adjusted her shawl. I'm not ready. You weren't ready when you danced with a broom. Or in the mud. Or blindfolded. But you did it anyway. She stepped back. The students stood. Begin. At first, your voice trembled. You stammered, forgot the names of steps, moved your own feet without grace. The mirrors felt accusing. The students felt skeptical. But then, something clicked. You stopped trying to be Lucien. You started showing what you felt. You don't spin to impress, you told them. You spin because stillness is too loud. You move your wrists like you're brushing something away, not dust, but doubt. Every heel that hits the floor should ask a question. One of the girls raised her hand. What kind of question? You smiled. Why not me? That cracked something open. They followed you. Clumsily at first. One tripped. Another flinched from their own reflection. But slowly, the rhythm emerged, a rough, honest rhythm, like water shaping stone. Lucien nodded. They won't be dancers, she said. They'll be echoes. You watched them try again, this time with their eyes closed. Maybe she was right. Maybe that was the point. When the session ended, the 5 students bowed. Not deeply. Not theatrically. Just enough to say, we see you. Lucien handed each of them a candle stub. No words. No instructions. They took them like relics. After they left, she turned to you. Do you understand what's happening now? You hesitated. A school. No, she said softly. A language. You sat beside her on the mirror floor. They'll be watching me more closely now, you said. They already are. Will it protect me? No, she said. But it will outlive you. That hit hard. You looked at your ankles, where the bells had stopped ringing. Lucien whispered, you've passed from rumor to ritual now. And you knew. There was no turning back. Your life fractured. Not broken, split. Like a coin flipped in the air, both sides spinning at once. By day, you were still handy the janitor. You mopped marble halls, carried water buckets, fetched coal for the upper kitchens. You answered to barked orders and dodged sharp elbows. You bowed. You kept your head down. But by night, you were something else entirely. You were teacher, symbol, rhythm, spark. You met with the 5 students in forgotten wings, behind dusty curtains, beside sleeping stoves. You taught them the scrolls, the weight of the cane, the whisper of footwork. And you watched them change. One began leaving chalk marks where none had been before. Another mimicked your spin with frightening precision. They weren't copying you. They were translating you. Lucien kept her distance. Not coldly, just knowingly. You don't need me anymore, she said. That's not true. No, she said, but it's becoming true. And she smiled like a parent watching a door close behind a child. But shadows lengthened. One morning, you entered the hall of mirrors and found it shattered. Not entirely, just enough. A long crack down the central mirror. A smear of oil across the floor. And carved into the marble with a blade. Silence belongs to the obedient. You didn't panic. You stood there, still as breath, and stared at the words until the letters stopped feeling like a warning and started feeling like a challenge. When the students arrived, you didn't mention it. You had them dance facing the crack. You move, you told them, because the world wants you still. You dance because stillness is a kind of death. They understood. Even if their feet fumbled. After they left, you stayed behind. Alone. You faced the broken mirror, raised your arms, and began again, not to defy them, but to remind yourself what you were. Not a dancer. A danger. Rumors now moved faster than you could trace them. Some claimed you'd been summoned by the Grand Vizier himself. Others whispered you had been cursed by a Sufi mystic. One scullery maid insisted she'd seen you float off the ground, if only for a breath. The truth didn't matter anymore. You had become a myth. And myths can't walk the halls unnoticed. That's when the eyes began following you openly. A steward who lingered too long near your mopping. A eunuch who smiled at you one moment and frowned the next. Even a concubine, veiled, silent, who dropped a coin at your feet and whispered, "They want to know if your silence can be bought." You didn't answer. Lucienne heard and laughed once, dryly. "They think you're something they can control," she said. "They still haven't understood." Understood what? That you already left the room. The moment you danced, you stepped out of their system. You're just walking beside it now. Then came the order. Plain. Unceremonious. Stamped with the imperial seal. Hamdi. Reassignment. Grand Pavilion. Immediate. You stared at it. The Grand Pavilion was the heart of power, where the Sultan held court, where ambassadors were greeted, where no one without rank ever stepped. Lucienne read it over your shoulder. Her voice dropped. "This isn't punishment," she said. "It's exposure." You nodded slowly. She wrapped your wrists in cloth herself that night, black linen, the color of dusk. "Don't reveal yourself too soon," she warned. "Let them watch. Let them wonder." Then she placed a ribbon inside your palm. Gold thread. Thin. Plain. You looked at her. "For luck?" you asked. She shook her head. "For memory," she whispered. "So you remember who you were before they saw you." You tied it around your finger and stepped into the Grand Pavilion. As the spark finally entered the fire. The Grand Pavilion was made of glass and breath and gold, not literally, but that's how it felt. The domes shimmered. The floors pulsed with heat. And every sound echoed like a whisper dropped in a cathedral. You had swept courtyards. You had cleaned latrines. You had danced in silence. But this was the throat of the empire. And now, you were inside it. No one greeted you. No one acknowledged you. But they watched. Viziers. Advisors. Foreign dignitaries. They didn't see Hamdi the janitor. They didn't see Hamdi the spark. They saw something they couldn't name yet, and so they stared. You were handed a broom. Longer. Heavier. Polished wood. Its handle bore a faint engraving, a flame encircled in thread. You understood instantly. This was both a tool and a test. You began to sweep. Slow. Deliberate. Like a man walking a blade. You swept with precision. Each movement balanced between grace and invisibility. You bowed without bowing. You moved without retreat. Your arms extended just so, your wrists bent like calligraphy, your steps quiet as rain on silk. And they watched. The Sultan wasn't present, but his shadow was. An elder courtier with no eyebrows and a voice like honeyed gravel murmured to a scribe beside him. A guard from the Janissaries narrowed his eyes. A foreign envoy in furs whispered something in Latin, and the interpreter coughed awkwardly. Still you swept. And then, just for one heartbeat, you turned the broom. Not wildly. Not theatrically. Just one spin, the kind you had invented in the mud pens. The spiral fold. Subtle. Sharp. A ripple passed through the chamber like the quiet after lightning. Then you stopped. Continued sweeping. as if nothing had happened. But you'd just done everything. That evening, they called for you. Not by name, by role. The janitor of the Grand Pavilion. Come. You entered the side chamber. Gold walls. No windows. 6 figures seated in a semicircle. The eldest, a woman in layered silks, spoke first. We've heard the whispers. Another, younger, thinner, sharper, leaned forward. We've seen the movement. The third, a man with a scribe's ink still drying on his thumb, unfurled a parchment. The Sultan wishes to know, is it you? You didn't answer. Instead, you stepped forward. And danced. No performance. No bows. Just truth. Controlled. Undeniable. You moved like water and stone and thunder. They watched. Silently. Rigid. And when you stopped, they didn't applaud. The woman in silk simply said, "Then we must decide what to do with you." You bowed, this time deeply. And left. Your chest tight with something you refused to name. Fear. Lucienne was waiting in the old bread oven, where the coals had long gone cold. She listened without interrupting as you told her everything. When you finished, she asked one question. Did they threaten you? No, you said. Worse. They listened. She nodded, slowly. Then they're not trying to stop you. You frowned. What are they doing, then? Shaping you, she said. Turning the spark into a torch. Because a spark they can kill. But a torch they can use. The idea chilled you. Then what do I do? Lucienne leaned forward, eyes fierce. You keep burning. But you choose where. You choose who gets warm. You choose what turns to ash. You look down at your hands. At your ankles. At the gold-threaded ribbon still tied to your finger. And you knew. The fire wasn't coming. It was already here. And it bore your name. They began to give you space. Not physically, the Grand Pavilion was as crowded as ever. But now, as you swept, as you moved, they made room around you. They spoke more softly when you passed. They shifted their feet as if not to disturb your rhythm. It wasn't deference. It was calculation. They were watching to see what would happen if they let the rumor keep growing. You made no grand movements. You danced only in the smallest ways, a turn here, a pivot there, a flick of the wrist that carried more weight than it should. But even the smallest gesture, carried by the right eyes, becomes a revolution. Lucienne warned you, they'll test loyalty through comfort now. Be careful of any door that opens too easily. You understood. And so, when the head steward of the inner palace offered you a private room, you declined. When the scribe sent for your name, you gave them your old one. And when a concubine left a silk ribbon on your pillow, you burned it. But fire cannot stay hidden forever. The scribes began compiling lists of who met with you, who mimicked your movements, who used steps instead of speech. Some of your students disappeared for a day or two. One returned limping. Another, silent. You tried not to panic. But the hall of mirrors felt colder. The crack in the glass seemed longer. One night, you arrived to find only 3 of the 5 waiting. They asked questions. One said, "What kind?" The girl with the ink-stained sleeve answered, "They wanted to know if we knew what the movements meant." And? She looked at you with something that almost resembled pride. "I told them we didn't need to know." That night, you danced with them again, but slower. You let the rhythm stretch like candle wax. You let them see the space between the steps. Where safety lived. Where meaning hid. Then, the unexpected. A summons from the Sultan himself. Not a message. Not an order. A personal invitation, delivered by a royal runner at dusk. You are requested at the garden colonnade at moonrise. No instruments. No guards. No audience. Suleiman too. Lucien's hand shook slightly when she read it. This isn't theater, she murmured. This is intimacy. What should I do? She stared at you. You'll go. You'll dance. But not for him. For who, then? For yourself, she said. So you remember that no matter how high they lift you, you belong to your own rhythm. You wrapped your feet in clean cloth, tied the gold thread once more around your wrist, and walked alone through the gardens, toward the man who ruled empires. He stood beneath the cypress trees, robe simple, hands folded. No crown. No guards. Just a man in silk, staring at the moonlight reflected on marble. You're smaller than I imagined, he said. You bowed. I've heard stories, he continued, of a boy who moves like wind through rope, who teaches steps that speak louder than sermons, who turns dirt into theater. You didn't respond. He stepped closer. Dance for me. You hesitated, then stepped forward. And you did not perform. You moved. Not for spectacle. Not for favor. But because silence had grown too loud. You spun once. Twice. You stopped mid-motion, held a shape like a broken question mark, then fell into a movement that wasn't yours, but had become yours. When you finished, he said nothing. Only stared. Then whispered, I wonder who is dancing through you. You bowed again, and left the ruler of the empire alone in his garden, wondering if he had just witnessed a rebellion or a prayer.